Good morning. I'm speaking to you from the European Parliament here in Strasbourg. I'm joined by Sean Kelly, Fine Gael MEP for the Ireland South constituency, and Ciarán Cuffe, Green Party MEP for the Dublin constituency. Gentlemen, you're both very welcome. Big story this week is again the discussion on the new European Green Deal. The MEPs are going to be voting on a resolution on the Green Deal, outlining some of the issues you want. Maybe Sean Kelly, to you first. Let's talk about what they're calling the just transition for this Green Deal. In other words, those who will be badly impacted by the Green Deal, how they will be compensated. What's going to happen with that?
Well, I think that's a key aspect of the Green Deal, because if we're going to move from a fossil-based society to a non-fossil-based society, obviously those who are working in the fossil fuel industries at this point in time are going to be impacted. And there will have to be a transition, and that transition has to be just. And if you take particularly Ireland and in our own constituency in Offaly, they are going to be made redundant as some of the peat power stations will be closed down. So there has to be a transition for them, either to work in a renewable energy station if such transpires, or to into a different job, and that will take a bit of time. It takes support, because the skills they have now might not be any value in jobs they might look for in the future.
But isn't all this a bit too little, too late for them, because they're already going to be made redundant? Surely these plans should have been put in place earlier.
Well, not really, in the sense that this takes time and it's not going to happen overnight. So there is plenty of time to say we're going to have a phase in of this, and in the meantime we're going to put a fund aside to help the affected workers, be they our workers in Offaly and Kildare and places like that, or the Polish miners in Poland. So I think once the mechanism is put in place, then the workers will know that they're not being forgotten about and left behind, and we can put in place measures to ensure that when it comes to the actual closure of the power stations, there's something to replace it for these unfortunate workers.
Ciarán Cuffe, how is that going to work in reality? Because, of course, Sean mentioned there Polish miners. You'll have people all over the EU who will be affected by the rollout of this Green Deal, whether they be working in old fossil fuel industries or whatever. So how are countries going to be able to identify who should be prioritised and how much money should they get, and how will the EU allocate that funding?
Well, clearly they have to prioritise the carbon-intensive industries, and coal mining is at the heart of it in Eastern Europe, but closer to home in the Midlands of Ireland. We see peat extraction, where we've lost most of our bogs in Ireland, and we're at risk of losing them all unless we take radical action, in one sense. I think Timmermans gets this. He is the grandson of a coal miner. We heard him say that recently, and he knows that we have to put in the education, the training and the new industries. Now, that can't be done overnight, but we do know that there's a huge amount of people living in fuel poverty in Ireland, and so there's a job of work to be done in retrofitting these homes, as simple as insulation, but new heating systems, improvements in housing that can reduce people's fuel bills, give them a warmer, cosy home, and there's a lot of work and a lot of skills required for that. So we need to be working with Bord Namona, working with state agencies and others to give that training, to bring people into the new jobs and not leave them hanging when the old jobs cease.
And what about the money that's going to be allocated? Have we any idea yet of the sorts of funds that will be available for these people and for individuals who want to retrofit homes, etc.?
Well, one thing that Timmermans made really clear this morning, he said, look, the funding is there if you have a plan, that the financial institutions and organisations, they want to put money into this transition, because we know there's so much money hanging out in the global financial markets, but they need a clear plan. I hope that we'll see that coming from the government's own plans that were submitted at the end of December. It was all a bit rushed, but I hope that will give us a roadmap for where we need to invest in Ireland to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and create those new jobs. And if we have a clear plan at home, then we'll attract the finance into it.
You're talking about Frans Timmermans, the Vice President of the European Commission, but I understand, Sean Kelly, will he be the principal EU official involved in the rollout now of this new Green Deal?
Yes, I think he, and particularly as he's probably the number two to Ursula von der Leyen, and he has a lot of experience because he was in the previous Commission, and as Ciarán says, his grandfather was a coal miner, so he has the credentials to see all sides, and he also, I think, he has the persuasive powers to get his viewpoint across in a practical manner.